Okay, so you guys, listen up. I'm not feeling my best today. I had a COVID test and it's negative, so don't go run screaming into the night. But so cooperate with me. You know how it's echoey in here? And when we all talk, it just gets kind of difficult. So you can just have mercy on Mrs. Ferguson. And, maybe try to talk one at a time, although I know sometimes you get an idea and you just blurt it out because that's what we do, because we're human beings, and it's okay. Go ahead and get your reading questions out if you don't already have them out. We're going to do a different kind of writing. We've spent several weeks now. Are we with me? No, getting papers out requires talking. I know this. All right, are we ready? All right. So we've been retelling stories for several weeks. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to do this towards the end of the class because I'm not sure if Julia is going to come in and get on this, but we'll just save it to the end, is those of you who had me last year, you will recognize this, writing reports. Using a source to write a nonfiction report is what we're going to do for the next few weeks, but I will give you the sources. So we'll talk about that at the end. I brought my handy dandy map of Europe because this week I had you read about Anglo-Saxon Britain. Now, what do we call the people who were there first? This isn't a hard question. Yeah, Celts, or what they call specifically, because the Celts were all over. Okay, we discussed this yesterday. I'm sorry, when I was growing up, they were Celts. It was Celtic, like the Boston Celtics. It was Celtic. I hate it when they just randomly change things on me. So every time I say Celts, I just kind of twitch. So the Celts were in Gaul, over here, but the particular people that lived in Britain were called the Britons, yes, only with an O instead of an AI. And these are the people that had Druid priests and set up Stonehenge. And although, they didn't know what? Well, it's just because it's that old. It must have been them. They don't know quite what it's for. Although this is an interesting fun fact. There's a medieval author named Geoffrey of Monmouth, and he wrote a history of Britain. And people kind of poo-poo it because he writes a lot of weird stuff. It's a lot about Merlin in Geoffrey of Monmouth, like the wizard with King Arthur, Merlin. But one thing he said was that Merlin brought Stonehenge over from Ireland. He sort of magicked it over. He made the stones light. Okay. To set it up as a burial monument for a battle that happened there, and then they actually excavated, and there are bodies buried by Stonehenge. There was a burial there. So maybe he was partly right. I don't personally believe Merlin magicked Stonehenge over, but I can't prove he didn't. So, so the Britons were there. And in 54, 55 BC, somewhere like that, Julius Caesar was running around Gaul, conquering tribes and keeping them in check. And he knew they were getting a lot of help from across the English Channel. And so he decided to cross over into Britain. And he didn't really accomplish much. He went twice, and he went up the Thames River all the way to where London is now. And the Britons sharpened wooden stakes with iron tips, and they put them in the river so their boats would crunch on them and sink their boats. So they could get out of the boats and wade to shore or swim to shore. It didn't kill a lot of them, but it kept them away. It wasn't for another 100 years that an emperor named Claudius finally took people to Britain, and they conquered Britain. And for 300, 400 years, it remained a Roman province until all those crazy tribes started invading, as the Roman Empire fell. And if you are a general in Italy. And you are being pounded by all these tribes. And you have soldiers up here. What are you going to do with the soldiers up here? Bring them down. I need you to come help. They pulled the soldiers out of Britain. And the Britons said, don't leave us alone. People are attacking us too. And they're like, yeah, we're sorry. Good luck with that. And they left. And indeed, they got attacked, and it was those Angles and Saxons that we read about today that were in charge. Yes, Ella, you look like you have a question. Tim's. Mm-hmm. This is the same. This is the time. This is the time. Yes. So, yes, they still, apparently the remnants of them are still there if you dive down. So I already answered your first question, I guess. Who was living in Britain before the Angles and the Saxons? The Britons were living in Britain, or the Celts, Celtic people. Yes. Yes, yes. The big river that runs through London, that's the river. That's the river. Yes. There's a London Bridge, and then there's the one that's really famous looking isn't not called London Bridge, it's called Tower Bridge, because it's by the Tower of London. But yes, you were there. You were there. Julius Caesar was there, and then 2,000 years later, you were there. Isn't that awesome? That's awesome that you can go to the places and just stand there and think, oh, what was happening here 1,000 years ago? Sometimes, okay, this is a digression on Mrs. Ferguson. Sometimes I like to, when we're driving and it's boring, you know, we're out on the interstate and there's nothing to look at, I just sort of let my mind wander, what was happening here 1,000 years ago? What was happening here too? Before all the trees, you know, in areas were cut down, what was this like? I often think, what was the Mississippi like 1,000 years ago here? This is what I like to do with my time. Okay, so why did the Angles and Saxons, who were peoples living around here, okay, and it's a quick trip, why did they go? This was the next question. What did anybody get for that? We don't know. They were bored. That's not the right answer. Bailey? The Picts, yes. Do you have to add to it, Ella? Which is just terrible. So this is Geoffrey of Monmouth again. Does anybody really feel like you're super into King Arthur and all the stories and know, or seen movies, or does Vortigern ring? It's fine. Vortigern comes up in the King Arthur stories, and he was having trouble with the Picts, who were from Scotland. They were attacking, and he said, "Hey, you Angles and Saxons, Hengist and Horsa." Talk about if you have twin boys someday. Hengist and Horsa, good names. No, I'm not getting laughs. No laughs today. He said, will you please come over and help me drive these Picts out? And they did, drive them out. And then they looked around and said, these Britons are a bunch of wimps. Hey, Joe, Fred, come on over. Come on. We can take over. And they did. They did. And so they are going to be the next ruling people. We had the Celts, the Britons. Then we had the Romans. Now we have the Angles and the Saxons. Remember, they're the people that Pope Gregory saw in the marketplace. He saw captured Angles and said they should be angels and sent missionaries to them. Yeah, there's two groups of people, but they came together, so we kind of lumped them together. And so, wait a minute, I don't want to. Okay, and I asked you if the Angles and Saxons were already Christians when they came. They were not. They were not. But do you remember how I had you read before the first class about all the monasteries and manuscript copying and everything that was going on in Ireland and Britain. These people were the Angles and the Saxons after they became Christians. So why do we call England, England? Yeah, Maya. Yes. You want to add, Bailey? It was Anglo land. This, because language changes. Have you? I already gave an example of that, didn't I? The Celts turned into Celts. Which is probably more classical because they tend to use a hard C, but in English we use a soft C in front of an E, like ceiling. And okay, this is not a phonics class, but you know, we have, our C's do double duty. But in the ancient world they didn't, so maybe they thought it was more authentic. I don't know. But language changes, doesn't it? We call things different, slightly different pronunciation, or completely different names over time. So the Angles of Angleland turned it into England. We met a couple of famous Angles in your reading, and one of them was named Caedmon. And I asked you, what was Caedmon's great gift? Alice. He had a good voice, and he was gifted with something else to do with his voice. Yeah. He sang scriptures. He wrote the songs too. So if you remember the story, there's a long section in your book. He really stunk at music, and this got him down. And he left parties. Can everybody relate? Like, have you ever been with a group of people and they're all doing something and you really stink at it, and you feel like, oh, do we have to do that? Do we have to play that game? I'm terrible at that game. Do we have to go on a skiing trip? I will break my leg, probably, skiing. So poor Caedmon, he worked in a monastery, but he wasn't a monk. He was sort of like the handyman. You know, he fixes things and does the gardening. And he left a party again, so they got to sing and make up songs, and he had a vision, and apparently an angel said, sing to me. He said, yeah, okay, the reason I'm sitting out here is because I don't sing and I can't make up. You will sing the story of creation. And he did. And so in the morning, he went and found one of the brothers, and he said, I don't know what happened to me. You know, I don't know if this is legit. I don't know if this is demonic, but something's happened to me. And they took him to the abbess who ran, it was monks, but it was adjacent to an abbey, and there was an abbess over both of them. And they could just read him any story out of the Bible, and he could turn it into a song. Now, I was going to say I'm dating myself. Like every 5 minutes I'm dating myself. But there was a contemporary Christian group called Caedmon's Call. Do you remember some? And none of my kids yesterday remembered. This is why they're called Caedmon's Call. Because they sing of the Lord. They sing the scriptures. And so, interesting fun fact, a contemporary Christian group decided to name themselves after a Anglo-Saxon monk who became a monk after. I'm sorry, they've taken away all my means of erasing. Like my little rag is gone, and I didn't bring a paper towel, so I need to. The other Anglo-Saxon guy we met was a guy named Bead. And he's always referred to as the Venerable Bead. What does it mean to be venerable? Nobody knows. Sometimes in some religious traditions they venerate certain things, so you might venerate the cross, or it does not mean worship. It means show high respect for. So venerable means you should be highly respected. I don't know when this guy, they called him the Venerable, but he was really, really an incredible man, living in around the year 700. He was brilliant. He wrote and he wrote and he wrote. He wrote commentaries on the scriptures. Lots of books of the Bible. He wrote a history of the church in England, in Latin, yes, but the English church, and he wrote it in Latin. And the Ecclesiastical History of the English Nation, which is a very cool book, which my high school students read when we do the medieval year. So we still read it today. And right up to his death, it says the last work of Bede was to translate the Gospel of St. John into English. Surrounded by some of his scholars who were helping him, he worked on this translation even to the day of his death. "It is finished," said the scribe as the last sentence was written down. "You are right," said Bede. "All is finished now." And quietly and in peace, the scholar died. What a lovely thing to finish the last thing you were working on. Perfect timing. Think of the number of people who, we don't get to pick when we die and who are in the middle of something. Do you know what I mean? Who have a project going. And, but he didn't. He ended his life having finished his final project. So we know a lot about the Angles and the Saxons through Bede, through Geoffrey of Monmouth, although the biggest thing people complain about him isn't so much magicking Stonehenge, it's the dragons. People really don't like the dragons, and so they say, well, none of this book can be true because he talks about dragons. But so let's do a little logic exercise. If you say that, what are you assuming? Listen to my statement again. None of this book can be true because he talks about dragons. Tell me something you're assuming if you say that. So are you saying that there still might be other things that are true? Okay. What else are you saying? You're assuming that dragons aren't real. And, maybe you laugh at me a little bit, but frankly, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there is one, I used to know all these names when my kids were little. Paracephalosaurus, and it's got a big thing, like a horn thing. Do some of you who are into dinosaurs know this? And they found chambers. There are separated chambers inside it, and there's a beetle, the bombardier beetle, that can mix two chemicals. It carries chemicals in its body in separate chambers, and when they mix, they're combustible, and it shoots fire out at predators. And it's just a little beetle, but if it can have two chemicals that mix, why could not some dinosaur have two chemicals that mix, and when it wants to mix them, spit fire at you? I don't know. Anyway, but yes, so poor Geoffrey of Monmouth, well, he wrote one thing we don't think is true, so we don't listen to anything he says. That's not right. And he wrote something we don't think is true, but we can't prove it's not true, but we still don't trust him. I'm not saying go run out and get a copy of Geoffrey of Monmouth and be devoted to everything he says, but maybe we should take take the value of what they're saying. He was there and we weren't. I like this. Leviathan. Yes. So I do not know. So another interesting thing, we're going to talk about Beowulf. We went short on that because I want to spend more time talking about Beowulf that you read this week. I have your reading questions. So the next thing that happens, let's just reiterate. We got Britons, then we got Romans, then we got Angles and Saxons, then the Danes. Remember last week, the Vikings? And do you remember I didn't have you read section 4? The Danes in England? Because we're going to read about what happens next with the Danes in England. So, before I hand this out, I want to show you, it says read chapter 6, part 4. That's the thing we didn't read the time before. And chapter 7, parts 1b and 1c. So the rest of chapter 7, part 1. Does everybody understand? I feel like I'm not being very coherent today, but does everybody understand? I'm going to go ahead and hand this out because on the back, I told you last week that Beowulf, that you read, was an Anglo-Saxon poem, but it was written about people living over here in Denmark. So the poem was from here, but the action is from here. Does that make sense? And it was written in Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon is English. It is what English came from, but I told you it's not really recognizable as English unless you're trained to read it. So I have the beginning lines of Beowulf for you in Anglo-Saxon, just so you can see how, yeah, so I know the first thing you're going to do is grab it and see if you recognize any words. I know. Here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Sorry, my fingers aren't. Oh, I gotta train myself to go back around. All right, there's probably gonna be an extra one because of Isabella. You can just leave it on the table. So I would like everybody on that page to write this down. Are we ready? I want you to write the name Benjamin Bagby. You know, on that paper with the Anglo-Saxon, just write it somewhere. Benjamin Bagby. I guess that was the same two words. Recites Beowulf. Write this down. I will give you a moment, then I will tell you why. So years ago, you know, in the ancient world and in the Middle Ages, people obviously did not have televisions and computers and radios and phones and record players. Now I'm dating myself again. So what do you do for entertainment? Well, sporting events, feasts, but also invite a traveling bard, a performer, to sing a poem for you. And everyone would gather together. You know, the bard is in town. You know, you invite all your friends and we'll have a big bonfire and we'll have food. And you know what, there are extra chairs here if you want to grab them, I don't mind. You invite your friends and he comes in with his harp, with his lyre, and he sings the poem. And this is how the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War, was performed, or the story of Odysseus coming home. And they were still doing this in medieval Europe. And so, as far as we know, Beowulf was one of these kinds of songs, poems. Funny, I think this is crazy. So we did not know about the existence of this poem until, I don't know, late 1700s, in the 1800s. We forgot about it. And somebody found it in a library. I'm just, what? What? You just stuck it between, how do you lose? I don't know. You lose a piece of literature. So it's only chance and somebody's eagle eyes in that library that we have a copy today. And like I said, it's about people who live here in, say, the year 500, 600, somewhere in there. But it probably comes from people living here around the year 1000. So what if I decided to write an epic poem about the Pilgrim's Landing? I might mix in some things from their time and some things from my time. Does that make sense? Like I might have the Pilgrim's Landing at Plymouth, but then signing the Declaration of Independence. I might be a little confused. And we think that's what the Beowulf author did. We don't know who came up with this poem. Completely anonymous. We don't know. But I had you read a retelling. So this is not the poem itself. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to tell you why I wrote this. So Benjamin Bagby is a modern day bard. And he amazingly has memorized the entire poem of Beowulf, among other Anglo-Saxon things. And he performs it live to audiences in Anglo-Saxon. So if you really want, it's like an hour and a half long. You can get the DVD from the library system, but you can also visit YouTube. And that's why I had you write this down. So if you just Google Benjamin Bagby Beowulf, you will find YouTube clips and you will find out what this sounds like. I don't know because I didn't try it, but if you put Benjamin Bagby, this is a lot of alliteration, Benjamin Bagby beginning Beowulf, you know, the start, maybe we can find the part that is the words and you could follow along. You know, in Anglo-Saxon. The DVD has subtitles. Are you looking it up? Does it come up? Okay. I know various clips. I don't know if the first lines do or not, but you will get a feel for what this would have been like to be sitting around that campfire and be hearing this, but you're not going to understand anything he says. Yes. The knowledge of Anglo-Saxon was not lost, just the poem. That is a very good question. No, we still knew how to. In fact, we've had, maybe you guys know this, you know, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were not authors by trade. They were professors of medieval literature by trade. Tolkien actually wrote a great essay on Beowulf, talking about the modern criticism of the poem Beowulf, because that was his job. So they both could read Anglo-Saxon and taught it, and I do not. I had a child, my oldest child wanted to do Anglo-Saxon as her high school language. So we got, it was basically a 2-year course. I found one. Anyway, if you're interested ever, you can learn it today. But, so we meet this guy, Beowulf. Tell me something about Beowulf. What's your impression of Beowulf? Just like throw out an adjective. He's what? He's a little arrogant. I'll buy that. Brave. Smart. He's pretty smart. He didn't let the fame get to him? Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, we could differ. You know, we just get a little mirror into him. He does say kind of braggart things, doesn't he? On occasion. But who wouldn't? So there is a problem at the beginning of Beowulf. If you have your copy, you can bring it, but if you didn't, it's fine. I'm going to read some sections. We meet Hrothgar, the king of the Danes, in Denmark. It says, Hrothgar, king of the Danes, glorious in battle, built him a huge hall, its gleaming roof towering high to heaven, strong to withstand the buffet of war. He called it Heorot, and lived there with his queen. At time of feasting, he gave to his followers rings and ornaments and bracelets of bright gold, cunningly wrought, graved with runes and deeds of dead heroes. Here they enjoyed feasts and high fellowship, story and song in the pride of armed peace. But away in the treacherous fens beyond the moor, a hideous monster lurked, fiend from hell, misbegotten son of a foul mother, Grendel his name. Hating the sound of the harp, the minstrel song, the bold merriment of men in whose distorted likeness he was shaped, twice 6 feet tall, with arms of hairy gorilla and red ferocious eyes and ravening jaws. He one night, when the warriors of Hrothgar lay slumbering after banquet, came to Heorot, broke down the door, seized in his fell grip a score or more. How many is a score? 20. a score and more of the sleeping sons of men and carry them home for meat. Oh, he's nasty. Don't know. But, so, well, let's get into the ugly, since you asked the question. So, it was the custom of these Germanic tribes, of these Celtic tribes, to have a feasting hall, okay? And sometimes they refer to it as the mead hall. Do you guys know what mead is? It's a drink. It's an alcoholic drink from fermented honey. Oh, no, it's good. Oh, I've had good mead in bed. My son brings me mead from Chicago. Anyway, so because I wanted to try it, and I've had some that's kind of bitter, some is kind of sweet. Anyway, but it is alcoholic. So this is me guessing. It was the custom for them to stay up late and have big feasts and toss back a lot of mead. And then they would sleep there because they're too drunk to go home. I don't know. Or maybe it was just camaraderie. I don't know. Let's just be realistic. But they would sleep on the benches or on the floor. Sleep, AKA pass out. Don't know. But that might explain if they're really out of it, that monsters can come in. However, it makes a cooler poem if you just snatch them. But B, what are you going to do against a twice 6 feet tall, hairy-armed gorilla, red-eyed, ravening jaw thing? Probably not much. Yeah, run. I'm guessing he's got a pretty good stride. You can go after him. But, so why does Grendel attack? Did you notice what Grendel doesn't like? Oh, yeah. The sound of the harp. So it doesn't just mean, oh, I hate harps. I like trumpets, but I hate harps. What does he not really like? What does the sound of the harp stand for? Merriment. I'm sorry, Roy. Were you going to say that? Music, happiness, partying, mankind, because he is shunned from mankind. Because Grendel never gets invited to the party. Now, in this version, it doesn't say this, but in the actual poem, it says that Grendel is descended from Cain, the first murderer. And I realize if you think about this logically, it's like, wait a minute, but Cain is a human being and Grendel is not. And all of Cain's descendants died in the flood. But don't go there. Just the idea, he's the race of the outcast, the race of the murderer. He's the evil line. Esau. Hairy guy. Esau. So he snatches these guys. Let me stop here and in the plot and talk about poetry for a minute. I told you this is a poem. When we say poetry today, what are things that you think of? If I say this is a poem, what do you think it has? Rhyme. What else? Sorry. Okay, tell a story. Did she steal your rhyme? Do you know what we call it when it has a certain, like the beginning of The Cat in the Hat, which, yes, I still remember. The sun did not shine, it was too wet to play, so we sat in the house all that cold, cold, wet day. As a tempo, as meter. Meter is what we call that. Anglo-Saxon poetry doesn't do any of that. By the way, what makes Hebrew poetry poetry? Do you know? It's that's exactly it. Repetition. So I was able to do this yesterday. Psalm 121. My kids memorized this when they were little. But listen to Psalm 121. Okay, let's see if I can do it. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. I've lost it. Oh, no, he will not let your foot slip. Indeed, no. I'll skip ahead. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your comings and goings both now and forevermore. Over and over. There's somewhere in the part I forgot, it says, he will not sleep. Indeed, the Lord does not slumber nor sleep. Like, okay, you said it once. Why are you telling me again? Because that's poetry. For the Hebrews, that's what made it poetry. So, I want to talk about one thing that makes Anglo-Saxon poetry poetry. Do you still have your Anglo-Saxon out in front of you? One thing that makes Anglo-Saxon poetry poetry is alliteration. What is alliteration? Yes, using the same starting sound. It could be a different letter, but as long as it makes the same sound. Like for us, a K makes a K, and a C makes a K, and sometimes a CH makes a K, but as long as it makes the same sound. Look on your paper. Do you see in one line where the same letter appears? What have I done with my book? Yes, Maya. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it either. But our reteller has done this for us. Let me read you a few lines out of this first page. The hall of Heorot rang loud and long, with woe of warriors and grief of the great king. Thereafter, from dark lake and dripping caves, night after night over the misty moor, listen to this line, came Grendel, gross and grim, famished for flesh. Alliteration. They like to do, a lot of the lines in Anglo-Saxon will have two words, the lines would have two halves with a break in between. And there would be two alliterating words and then one in the second half. And they kept that I won't call it a rhythm because we talked about meter, but that idea working through da 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 and then another da boom in the second half. That's what made it poetry. Alliteration is kind of fun. Do you ever do assignments where you're forced to write alliteration, like to your parents or no? A lot of alliteration is tongue twisters for us, isn't it? Like Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Are we familiar with this?
It
might be easier to memorize. You know, so if you have to memorize, not if you have to, if your job is being a bard and traveling around, wouldn't it be nice to have things to help you remember, you know? And for us, meter and rhyme helps us remember, but for them, maybe the alliteration helped. Anyway, back to Grendel, may or may not be a descendant of Cain. And the news about this horror spreads far and wide. And up here, I can't ever remember. You guys are better in geography than me. So, Sweden? Is it Norway, Sweden, Finland? Oh, okay. What? This one.
Norway, Sweden.
I knew this once upon a time.
Finland is on the other side.
Finland, okay. I used to know the geography song. No, I haven't done that in ages. There's a guy named Beowulf. He is not the king, but he is well thought of in his realm, and the king is some sort of relative of his, and he's high in court. And he is just up for anything, because that's how you get famous. You know, you go fight monsters. So he shows up and he says, I can do something about this. I can get rid of Grendel for you. He shows up and he meets a guy. Let me go. If you're looking in your book, I'm on pages 8 and 9. Hrothgar, who's suffering under this horrible bane of Grendel, takes him by the hand, bottom of page 8, and said, Beowulf, I knew you as a child, and who has not exulted in your fame as a fighter? It is a triumph song that ocean thunders to her farthest shore. It is a whisper in the frailest seashell. Now, like your princely father long ago, in the brimming kindness of your heart, you have come to deliver us. But there has to be a naysayer in every crowd, apparently, and Unferth is the naysayer here. But Unferth bristled at these words. Unferth, who sat always at the feet of Hrothgar, a groveling, jealous man who could not bear that anyone should win more fame than he. Braggart, he cried, are you not that Beowulf who failed against Brecca in the swimming match? 7 nights you wallowed in the wintry sea. Some sport that was. Sport for jeering waves that jollied you like spindrift from crest to crest, till sick with cold you shrieked for mercy. Who heard? Not Brecca, who long since had battled to land. But the sea, tired at last of its puny plaything, spewed you ashore. Aren't you that Beowulf that had a swimming contest with this Brecca guy? You really stunk. He just completely skunked you on that and just showed up at shore and you were just crying. Beowulf answers though, angrily Beowulf answered, that's a drunkard's tale. True, Brecca was first ashore, but I could have raced him had I wished. We were boys then, with our full share of folly, plunging, sword in hand, giddily to battle with monster whales, when a storm came sweeping down, and gruesome waves ground and trampled us under. It was Brecca that cried for help. I fought to save him, but a fierce northeaster whipped us apart, and I saw him no more. In the dark and bitter cold, the icy brine was heaving murkily with monsters. Glad was I of my sword and mailcoat, for a serpent had wound his sinewy coils about my waist and squeezing dragged me below. But before he could break, I slew him. 9 others too, before the raging flood tide rolled me to land. I am not aware that you, brave Unfirth, can boast such a record. If you be as bold as you proclaim, tell me. How comes it that Grendel is still alive? Ha, I know a coward when I see one. Okay, this is kind of brutal for somebody you just met. What were you going to say, Maya? Yes, just with the wind, prevailing wind from the northeast and a really bad storm. So, another fun fact about the Anglo-Saxons. You're going to love this. Use this information with care when you go home, though. So, a fun activity, if the bard is not available and you're tired of feasting, was, done it again. Oh, there we go. An activity called flighting. Flighting is an insult match. And I am not kidding. You get 2 guys and you're all around and then you just rip into each other. And people are like, yeah, good one, you got him there. So again, do not go home and initiate flighting in your family unless the other person is very willing and is not easily offended. It's entertaining. Are any of you familiar with the Redwall books? Did any of you read Redwall when you were young? Okay, we were big Redwall fans. I read all 22 of them out loud to my kids with accents. And the hares, the salamander-strung hares, sometimes do some flighting. Sometimes they do this. Yeah, so he and Unferth, it sounds very harsh to us, like, whoa, you just laid into each other and you never even saw each other before. And yes, there's some personal stuff going on. Unferth apparently doesn't like anyone else to get the limelight, right? I want the light shining on me. I don't know, Beowulf guy taking away my thunder. But there is some flighting going on there too. But nobody listens to Unferth because Unferth is known to be a bit of a jerk apparently. And so they go to sleep that night. What does Beowulf do that night? He stays awake, and what does he do to Grendel? He does a little more than break his arm. He rips his arm clean out of the socket. He just rips his arm off. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that would be sad. Oh, no. Okay, since we weren't sure, let's find it. I did mark it. Okay, here's Grendel coming. Okay, there's the blood-soaked trophy, so it must be up above that. Okay. I'm on page 13. Such torture as this the fiend had never known. Beowulf's got him in his grip. In mortal fear, he was minded to flee to his lair, but Beowulf prisoned him fast. Spilling the benches, they tugged and heaved. From wall to wall they hurtled, and the roof rang to their shouting. The huge hall rocked. The strong foundations groaned and trembled. Then Grendel wailed from his wound. His shriek of pain roused the Danes in their hiding and shivered to the stars. The warriors in the hall spun reeling from their couches. In dull stupor, they fumbled for their swords, forgetting that no man-made weapon might avail. Alone, Beowulf tore Grendel's arm from his shoulder asunder, wrenched it from the root, while the tough sinews cracked. Gentlemen love this part. That deadly was the wound, well knowing that deadly was the wound, and his mortal days ended. And I love this line. The hero rejoiced in his triumph and wildly waved in the air his blood-soaked trophy. Do you remember what he does with it? He hangs it up on the wall, nails it down. Which, I know, I was thinking yesterday, yeah, not really feeling like breakfast with that there, but...
You'd expect, like, oh my gosh, like, that's so cool, and I'd be like, get out of the wall. Put it in the dust.
clean up that mess. However, so rejoicing is high at Heorot. We're saved, except, oh, monsters have mommies too. And when you mess with a child, mommy gets so mad.
Wait, after you cut off Grendel's arm,
No, he wandered back to his lake. And he dives into the lake where he bleeds out. I know, so Grendel's family lives in a lake. I got nothing to say about that, except I picture it, that you dive down and then there's a cave entrance and there's a cave under the lake and you go in and then there's air trapped there. Does that make sense? The poem does not tell us. He just dives down and then, okay, now I'm at Grendel's mother's house, but I'm under the water and I don't understand, and have we talked about the willing suspension of disbelief? Have I used this term to you guys? Sometimes when you read a book or watch a movie, you just have to not ask certain questions because it ruins the story. Do you know what I mean? How are you breathing under the water? So I love movies about time travel. I'm just really into it. I think theoretically it might be possible, but that's for another day. But some time travel movies are really good, and I'm just in it. And some time travels are really bad. Travel movies are really bad, and I think, yeah, that would never, but you did this before, and I start picking it apart, and that's the moment I know this isn't a very good movie, because I have not entered into it. Does that make sense? I've not just allowed myself, okay, I'm not going to pick it apart logically, I'm just going to go with the flow. There has to be a degree, but then sometimes, though, we have to say, that might not exactly line up, but I'm into the story, and I'm going to, so Grendel lives under the water. I'm with you. Don't know how that works, but I'm with you. Yeah, Maya. No. I haven't seen that Little Women, but I've heard maybe not. Well, see, but she's Wonder Woman. So you have to make a decision. Are you just going to say, okay, you're a superhero, so now you have powers and I don't really think too hard about it? Or you say, yeah, but I've scientifically analyzed your powers and you would not be able to, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong to feel that way, but it's just sometimes we have to enter into it. Anyway, that was a slight digression, but so I choose to enter into the fact that Grendel's family lives under a lake, but somehow they can breathe air, and we're good with that. Well, and that means it's a bad movie, you know. Okay, so Grendel's mother, so we all hang out in the mead hall again. Yay, we can party again. Oh, but that night Grendel's mother comes and snatches a guy for breakfast. Again, and it's happening again. So, of course, Beowulf is still there, and Beowulf says, I'm on it. Yes, right. I think, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think he just bled out in the water. He goes home because his arm and he's bleeding, and he trudges home and says, "Mom," you know, and then he dies. This is my version.
So the gorilla can live leave that one as well.
You're thinking too hard, Ella. Okay, so, are you with me? Grendel's mom has breakfasted. Beowulf's on the case. And on page 25, we read this. Because he knows this is serious. I mean, it's bad enough to rip a guy's arm off, the 12-foot tall guy, but now I gotta dive under the water. I don't know what's gonna happen. And you know, remember this lake was bubbling with all sorts of monsters. I don't know what was living in this lake besides Grendel. There was a bunch of stuff in this. So he's gonna dive in, and he says this, "O noble Hrothgar, gray-haired giver of treasure, I'm ready to depart. But whether it be that Hrunting is the name of his sword, that Hrunting shall win me fame or death devour me, I know not. But secret are the ways of fate, and her word final. But should I die, I beg you look to my men, and listen to this, give Unferth my sword." There's no hard feelings. Unferth has, I don't know if they've included in this one, Unferth has, in the meantime, apologized after the Grendel. You are awesome. Unferth said, "Give Unferth my sword." Now, I want to note something. Of course, he goes down and he's Beowulf, so he wins, despite the fact that he tries to uses a sword that melts, right? When he cuts off Grendel's mother's head, because her blood is so toxic or something that it melts this enchanted sword. So this is the page where I circled of fate. Secret are the ways of fate. And then I turn the page, and it says, God Almighty in his wisdom set him free from Grendel's mother. And then it talks about God the Father again on the next page. Here's the reason that scholars like Tolkien and Lewis love this poem. Because it's this people that's becoming Christian, but they're in between. So sometimes they talk about fate. This is a fun word. Hiding that under there. Weird. And it actually is kind of where we get the word weird from. Weird means fate in Anglo-Saxon. And so like in Macbeth, they refer to the witches sometimes as the weird sisters. And it doesn't mean they're just weird. They're so weird. They're like the bearers of fate. It's kind of in that in-between. So sometimes these people talk like they're Christians. God the Father has saved me. And then sometimes, secret are the ways of fate. Hey, gentlemen, are you with me? Okay. So he's the winner. He goes home, and 50 years pass. After Hygelac, Beowulf's king, was dead, and Herdred had been slain, then Beowulf, strong in valor as in wisdom, mightiest yet mildest of men, for 50 years reigned over his people in peace and prosperity unchallenged. Until, what happens to rock the boat? Who shows up? Dragon. Dragon shows up. What ticks the dragon off? Do you remember? Someone stole some of his treasure. It says, a stranger crept in. From the dim vault blazed upon him a wonder of wealth, jeweled flagons, bowls graven with weird imagery, golden goblets whose shine the long centuries had not tarnished. One goblet he stole, and a heap of rings, and stealthily made off. Okay, we're gonna read. There's a certain book that we're gonna read next spring, but you may be familiar with it already. Can you think of a story? Do any of you already know a story where a cup gets stolen from a dragon and it ticks the dragon off? So, my daughter majored in creative writing, and one of her teachers at Augustana told her the writer's job was to read and pillage. Pillage from what you read. Tolkien read and pillaged. Much of what we're going to read, that's why we're going to read The Hobbit this year, much of it comes from Anglo-Saxon mythology and literature, and if we had time, we'd read all the Lord of the Rings, but they're long. We don't have time. So the stealing of a cup brings the dragon out. But Beowulf, I don't know. 50 years is a long time. So maybe he's 20 years old when he fights Beowulf. How old is he now? 70. And maybe he's taken really good care of his health. Maybe he works out, he eats lots of antioxidants and spinach, whatever. But 70 is older to fight the dragon, and he says, I want to do it myself. Yeah, he tells his guys, stand back. Stand back. I will do this. And he doesn't, does he? He has Wiglaf, his kinsman, it says, and friend, comes to his rescue, chews out the other guys for not helping their king. But it's too late. He is incinerated, basically, burned. He has enough left in him to give some last words, but he's not well. And he says this to Wiglaf. Do any of you remember what he asks Wiglaf to do? He says, you, Wiglaf, must share it, the treasure, among them, for I shall be gone. Share it according to their need. And then he gives them instructions about making a funeral pyre. And he asks, oh, I thought I saw you, Bailey. He asks Wiglaf, I can't find it. He asks Wiglaf to run off and bring a bunch of the treasure and show it to him. Oh, here, I got it. Go quickly, dear Wiglaf, under the gray stone to the treasure within. Now the dragon is dead to spoil him. Bring me a banquet of jewels to feast my hungry eyes on quickly before I die. I want to see what I just died for. Lay it out here. Show me some. And Wiglaf, share it out. Do you remember? Does Wiglaf obey him? Anybody remember the end? That's okay. Is this helping that we're going through it? Okay. Okay, 10 days they labored to build it, the funeral mound, and raised about the rim a rampart of boulders, burying the treasure beneath, jeweled flagons, gold rings and goblets, all that wonder of wealth. For there was a curse upon it. No man dare keep it. Cursed treasure. In a few, month or two, we're going to read a book retelling Norse mythology. And there's a famous story in there about cursed treasure. Cursed treasure was a thing. I'm just curious, how many of you have read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader? Not just seen the movie, but read the book? Because, okay, now I'm just Mrs. Ferguson's opinion. Nix on the movie, thumbs up on the book. Yeah. Yes. Eustace lays around on a dragon's hoard, right? And C.S. Lewis tells us he doesn't know. He doesn't know you don't mess with stuff like that because he'd read the wrong sorts of books. The books he read were strong on governments and dreams, but weak on dragons. He didn't read literature like this, and he didn't know the dragon's hoards. Don't mess with that. And it's also like at the end of The Hobbit, isn't it? Because Thorin kind of goes a little wacky because a dragon has been in charge of the dwarves' treasure for so long. I don't know. If now I've probably just busted The Hobbit wide open for those of you who are familiar with it. Say again. The Cave of Wonders. Don't touch the treasure. Yes. So thus ends Beowulf. 2 glorious victories in youth and 1 fatal, but attempt nonetheless. One more thing. I've noticed our time, we only have half an hour, and I have 2 more things I want to do with you guys. But one interesting, fun thing that Anglo-Saxon poetry does is they use something called Kennings. You don't have to write these down, but sometimes you might not. It helps me to see words instead of just hear them. Kennings. Kennings are when we use a two-word phrase to describe something. So I wrote down some Kennings just out of this book. My glasses. So, for example, he calls the dragon a sky plague because he flies in and brings death. He calls your body a bone house, right? So, okay, now I'm going to read the Kenning and see if you can guess what he's describing. What do you think an aerostorm is? A battle, an aerostorm. How about, this one's really easy. What is the sky candle? The sky candle, the sun, yeah, okay. How about a war mask? A helmet, good. The whale road. The sea. It says he took to the whale road. And my personal favorite, and this doesn't have a particular, a whale road. Well, but it takes its own path. See, you can't think too hard. You have to think enough, but not too much. Do you know what I mean? Just somewhere in the middle is the degree of thinking. Okay, so here's my favorite one. What do you think it says? Word hoard. Yeah, I mean, so a book. So Beowulf, it says in the poem, Hrothgar asks who he is and where he's come from, and it says Beowulf opens up his word hoard. I love it. His mouth, his spirit, his ideas. So when I bought a Kindle, I named it Michelle's Word Hoard. Isn't that lovely? Word hoard. Open up your word hoard. I hope you enjoy. Maybe if you are in my high school class, when we do the Middle Ages, we will read the actual poem. If it was difficult to follow, a hint, which I should have given you last week, is often stop at the end marks. Don't stop at the end of lines. Do you notice how sometimes the line continues and the thought continues on to the next one? Also, I know we feel awkward about doing this for some reason, but reading out loud can help you understand things. It just can. Do you know once upon a time everyone read out loud? There was no silent reading. Apparently everyone who, St. Augustine in his Confessions talks about going to visit St. Ambrose, and he says something like, and he was sitting with a book, and his eyes scanned the page, but his mouth did not move and his voice made no sound. Yeah, he's reading a book. And he says, I don't know why he was doing this, but I'm sure he had a good reason. And now that's the way we all read, you know, it's just kind of weird. So, and sometimes I read out loud to myself, and yes, I often feel awkward when I do it, so. Okay, so we are going to work on our new paper, and if we have time, which I hope so, we have Anglo-Saxon riddles. And the fun thing about them is we don't know the answers. I know. Okay, would you guys just, so I don't get tangled up, I'm just gonna actually give a pile. And I don't know if there's the right amount, but you guys make it work among yourselves. So what I would like you to do with that is get out a piece of notebook paper. I'm gonna get this out of the way. And I would like you to write this on your paper. Put a Roman numeral 1, and let's put 3, 4, 5, and let's put the word clincher. To some of you, this is going to be really, really familiar, and some of you will have never done this before, and it's okay either way. Does everyone have one of those papers that says Sutton Who? Does everyone have one? Is there an extra one somewhere? Then I can use that one for me. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, whenever we are asked to write a nonfiction report, we need to find sources that tell us what we want to know, and then we need to take the ideas and present them again. Is it okay if I just want to copy word for word out of another book. What do we call that? Well, yes, plagiarism. Plagiarism. We call that plagiarism. It is illegal. You can get kicked out of schools for plagiarism. Don't plagiarize. Oh yeah, you can be expelled. Colleges might throw you out. I don't know if they would anymore, but once upon a time they would. Don't copy someone else's ideas word for word. However, you can paraphrase, because that's all any books do, right? Dorothy Mills just read other history books and then put the story in her own words. So we're allowed to do that. We are only going to do one paragraph this week. It's going to be really easy. And if you've done this before, it will be even easier. And I'm going to show you how to gather information, okay? First of all, in our outline, our Roman numeral 1 is the topic sentence. Thank you very much. A topic sentence tells you what the paragraph is going to be about. Are we all listening up? I know for some of you this is review, but remember, other people at your table it might not be. You are going to write a paper on the Sutton Hoo burial. So everybody can write this down, because this is everybody's topic. Now the paper I gave you has more than a paragraph. So are we going to be able to put everything in this paper in our paragraph? No. No, you're not. How are we going to decide? I will tell you. If you think something is important, or you just think it's interesting. Make sense? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read every sentence or every section there, and then we're going to take a vote. Is it interesting or is it important? All right? And if it is, we're going to jot it down. We don't need to write the whole sentence out. Just a few words, like we did with our story retelling. Just a few words to jog our memories, to make us remember what the idea was. All right? Here we go. I'm starting at the top of your page. In 1938, the owner of some large barrows or mounds of earth, we're just doing retellings, or Unit 4 reports. In 1938, the owner of some large barrows or mounds of earth in Suffolk, England, wanted to find out what was inside. She asked the local museum to find her an excavator. The following year, one of the most spectacular archaeological discoveries of the century was made. Is any of that interesting or important? I feel like it's important. Where and when? So how about if we say in 1938, in England, if we use the word barrow, will we all remember what that means, or is that not a good idea? Burial, well, because they didn't know it was a burial yet. Can we just write earth mound? Would that, everybody be okay with that? Earth mound. I'm giving us more words than Mr. Prudowa says, but I don't care. England, earth mound, excavated. All right, that tells us when, that tells us where, that tells us what they did. I think that sets us pretty good. It says they made a fantastic discovery, but then I think the rest of the paper is going to tell us what the discovery is, so maybe we can just wait and see what the discovery was. Are we all ready? Inside the largest barrow, they found traces of a wooden boat 89 feet long. Although the body had long since rotted away, it had been surrounded with many beautiful and priceless objects. Archaeologists believe that this was the grave of an East Anglian king called Raedwald, who died in about 625. Okay, I've gone too far. Is there anything interesting or important there? What do you think, Samin? Okay, or we've got plenty of room, so we could use a couple. Tell me some things that you think are interesting or important there, Maya. Okay, so they found an 89-foot boat. Are you guys familiar with putting a little mark like this means feet, okay? If you're not and you don't remember what that means, you could also just abbreviate foot. 89-foot boat, and it was a burial, right?
He was buried in the boat?
Yes, he was buried in the. You know what? So you can see there's another part. Yeah, I'm just going to do it now. I brought the book I made this copy out of because I didn't want to. It was difficult to copy both pages, but I wanted to show you the picture. So they've got an artist's recreation. Can everybody kind of see that? There's this boat, and the guy's laying there. Does everybody see? I'll leave this out and open if you want to take a closer look at it. But that's the idea. So the picture you have is what's left of it, of the boat. But this is what it might have been like when they buried him. 89 feet is pretty long. It's a big boat. This must have been a seriously big earth mound. And you got to pile enough earth over it to, okay. So I'm just going to tell you, I think it's interesting that this might be a known king named Redwald. I personally think that's interesting. So because I'm up here at the board, I get to choose. I'm going to say I'm just not saying King Redwald 625. Maybe, yeah, doesn't matter if he was born in 625 or died in 625. It's a long time ago, either way. Redwald was also declared Bret Walda, or High King of Britain. Ooh, he wasn't just king, he was High King. That makes him sound even more important. Although the type of burial was pagan, not Christian, Redwald was buried with some Christian objects. Possibly he had been converted to the Christian religion. Interesting or important? Or are we passing on that? Okay. You know what? Do we all have to think the same things are interesting? No, we do not. So our papers could turn out differently. You know what? I will go with the majority, or I don't know if it's a majority, the ones who think it's interesting. Christian objects. And then I'm going to put this. I'm going to put Christian objects and Christian question mark. Okay, convert, and then a question mark. Was he a convert? Does everyone understand what that means? Does that make sense to you? Okay. This only works if it makes sense to you. All right, don't let me put something up here that makes sense to me. Speak out and say, but that doesn't make sense to me. I won't remember what that means later when I look at it. Okay? I'm going to read this little section off to the right here. The king's helmet has been reconstructed. Oh, I should show you the picture. I didn't make the picture because I didn't think it would turn out good. This is a helmet they found. An Anglo-Saxon helmet. And actually my copy of Beowulf has this on the cover of the poem, which is kind of cool. Yes, I love the mustache on, does everybody see? The helmet has its own mustache. I think that's really important. I don't know. Okay, so here's what it says about it. The king's helmet has been reconstructed by specialists at the British Museum. It carries two emblems, a dragon over the crest and a bird across the face, which I'm sorry, I really don't see the bird when I look at the picture. The helmet and the sword and shield are similar to ones found in Sweden. Is any of this interesting or important to anybody? Okay, we're kind of about that. All right, let's read the next part though. Other objects, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, so if we were we could put helmet, comma, Christian objects if you're not in about them, or you can leave the helmet out. But listen to this. Other objects show how far people traveled at the time. Silver dishes from Constantinople were among the possessions of this English chief. This guy had dishes from Constantinople. So I think that's interesting. I'm going with it. Dishes from Constantinople, which is several thousand miles away. Yeah, yeah, the way they decorate them, that sort of thing. Now, it looks like I have filled up my 5 points. So I have 2 options now. Option 1 is I am sick and tired of this, and I don't want to do this anymore, and I'd rather go play or watch a movie, and I just am tired. And so I'm sorry, I'm setting a bad example. And I'm done because I did what Mrs. Ferguson told me to do. Yay. Other is I can see, oh, but I didn't read this part yet, and maybe there's something even more interesting or important. So if I wanted to, I could add a couple more points, all right? Usually we try to go somewhere between 5 and 7 points in a paragraph, all right? So just in case, I'm going to give myself a little more room. Maybe nothing will grab me, but you never know. All right. The king was laid out ready for his journey to the next world in a seagoing clinker-built ship, which I can never, what clinker-built, it has to do with how the wood is put together, because I hear this phrase, I know nothing beyond that. He had supplies of clothes, cloaks and leather shoes, spears and other weapons, and objects ranging from a lyre, a small harp, to a great bronze cauldron. Do we care about anything else this guy had buried with him? We're all voting that we're tired of this and we want to quit, aren't we? I can see it on your faces. Bailey? Okay, so he had, I'm going to put weapons, leather clothes, what is it, leather clothes? Leather shoes, cloaks, okay. Weapons, cloaks, and a lyre, because I just think that's kind of cool. And a cauldron. Yeah, cauldron's optional. Cauldrons are a little boring. Oh, cauldron. You can put the cauldron in though. Okay, so now I have gathered, for my report on the Sutton Hoo burial, I have gathered information. What do I do now? Well, now I have to turn it back into sentences and write it as a paragraph. My first sentence is going to tell you, what is this about? So I need to turn these words back into a sentence, something like this. You could ask a question. Have you ever heard of the amazing Anglo-Saxon burial at Sutton Hoo? And I've used the words, you know what it's about. Or, the burial at Sutton Hoo was an amazing archaeological discovery. Or if you can't remember, just once upon a time, amazing stuff was found at Sutton Hoo. So don't use the word stuff. Objects. Right? That tells your reader this is what this paragraph's about. It's about some burial at Sutton Hoo. And then all you have to do is turn these back into sentences. Can I mix up the information if I want to? Sure. Can I combine things? Sure. No problem. It might sound like something like this. In 1938, a person in England had an earth mound on their property and they had it excavated. Underneath, they found an 89-foot-long boat and a burial, which could be the High King Redwald from the year 625. You see how I'm doing it? Does everybody feel good with that? Now let's talk about this word clincher here. Andrew Pudawa, who teaches the Institute for Excellence in Writing, he said that we're all a little dense. You know, we don't remember things very well, which is true of me anyway. And so he says if you want somebody to remember what you say, Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them. Then tell them what you told them, right? And then they might remember what you say. So, we tell them what we're going to tell them. This paragraph is about a burial mound in Sutton Hoo, in England. Then we tell them. Now we're going to tell them what we told them. So somehow we need a closing sentence that works in Sutton Hoo burial again. For example, many other amazing things were found at the Sutton Hoo burial. I've worked it in. The Sutton Hoo burial turned out to be an amazing archaeological discovery. I've worked it in again. You got an idea, Maya? Yes. So somehow, in whatever way, I want to work back in my last sentence that this is what my paragraph has been about. Now everybody look at me. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. You don't have to use the exact same words. Have you ever noticed, let me give you an example. I'm writing this paragraph, okay? And I get down, he had, in addition to a helmet, he had many Christian objects, leading many to believe he might have been converted to Christianity. He even had dishes all the way from Constantinople. He was surrounded by cloaks, his weapons, and his beloved lyre. And I just stop there. That's the end of my paragraph. And it just stops. It's so sudden. But do you notice how if I add another sentence and it says, these are just a few of the amazing discoveries that were made back in 1938 at Sutton Hoo. It closes it off. Does everybody see what I mean about that? If you're just listing a bunch of information and then you just stop, your reader is jolted a little bit by the suddenness of the stop. But this gives us a chance to close it off, to give them some closure for our paragraph. This is what I want you to do this week. You already have an outline made, right? So all you have to do is reconstruct this into a paragraph. I'm going to look for you guys to have a topic sentence and a clincher, and yes, our parallelism. Now, I'm going to give a proviso to this. It is harder to do in nonfiction writing. You don't think so? All right. For some people, it is harder to do. We'll agree to that. Because you can't just let your imagination go. When you're writing a story, you can just sort of add in and embellish. And when we're writing about a real thing, we don't want to suddenly set it in another time and place. We're writing about a real thing that's true, and we need to keep to the truth. So sometimes it's harder. We can't just make stuff up to fill in for our parallelism. Yes? Yes. Yes. Yes, harder in nonfiction, yes. So do the best you can. There will be no beatings. Again, I reiterate, no beatings. But don't say, oh, Mrs. Ferguson said it was hard, so I'm not even going to try. Because look, weapons, cloaks, lyre. I gave, gift from Mrs. Ferguson to you, 3 nouns, all right? And you could use your imagination a little bit. The excavators worked excitedly, diligently, and give me another, carefully. And that's probably true. We know it was carefully. When you dig up stuff, you can't just start shoveling and throwing dirt everywhere. You've got to dig very carefully so you don't disturb things. The phrases, the parallelism with phrases or clauses could be a little more difficult, but I believe in you. Do this, okay? And mark them with T. All right. So this week, I almost forgot. I almost did this yesterday too. This week, you're going to write this paragraph for me. You're going to read the Dorothy Mills sections that are listed at the top of your questions. We're also going to start, may I erase this? Are we all good? Okay. We're also going to start reading the book, The Dragon and the Raven. That is our next book. It is about the Danes in England. Have any of you ever read a book by G.A. Henty before? Lots of homeschoolers read a lot of G.A. Henty books. He writes historical fiction, and they're very well researched, and the language is really good, and they always have a young male hero who's just awesome. So The Dragon and the Raven. And chapters 1 through 5, which will go right along with what you're reading in the Dorothy Mills book this week, because we're going to learn about a king in England named Alfred, who, when things looked like they were at their worst, didn't give up. When it looked like the Danes, the Vikings, were overrunning his entire kingdom, he didn't give up. He was called Alfred the Great, because he was great. All right? Okay, in the time we have left, you got to help me figure out some of these Anglo-Saxon riddles, okay? They're crazy. So this is a book of Old English poems. I mean, they're not written in Anglo-Saxon, but they're translations. There's a wonderful poem in here called The Dream of the Rood. The Rood is an old-fashioned name for the cross, and it portrays Jesus like a warrior, like he's stripping off his clothes to go out to battle, but the battle is climbing up on the cross and dying for us. But he's a warrior, a victorious warrior. It's cool. Anyway, so they also gave us the riddles, and they have suggested answers in the back. Suggested answers, and some of them have question marks because nobody knows. And unfortunately, one of you may figure it out after all these centuries, but we'll never know if you're right. It's the sad thing. Okay. Let me choose. Oh, I like this one. Okay, so they're kind of long. And so if any of you, again, are familiar with The Hobbit, Gollum and Bilbo ask riddles of each other, but they're not like, why did the chicken cross the road type of riddles. They're not ha ha ha, isn't that a funny joke? They're puzzles. Do you understand what I mean? Okay. So there's not going to be no laughing. It's not going to be funny. It's going to be a puzzle to figure out. Okay. This is a long one. I'm the world's wonder, for I make women happy, a boon to the neighborhood, a bane to no one, though I may perhaps prick the one who picks me. I am set well up, stand in a bed, have a roughish root. Rarely, though it happens, a churl's daughter, more daring than the rest, and lovelier, lays hold of me, rushes my red top, wrenches at my head, and lays me in the larder. She learns soon enough, the curly-haired creature who clamps me so, of my meeting with her. Moist is her eye. What do you think it is? Oh, that's not their suggested one, but yes, it could be. Oh, red top. Prick the one who picks me. Okay, I like. What? Oh, women. I like your answer better than the one in the back. But they've got more. Guess. A thorn bush, maybe. Don't know why. There's only one problem with your answer. Why would you put the rose in the larder, the pantry? To make rosehip tea. Maybe. Roy, you had an idea. Did he steal your idea? Oh, okay. Well, it didn't work, did it? Okay, so their suggested answer is an onion. I'm sorry, this is not my fault. Do not attack. Because the onions make you cry. Onions make you cry, you know? When it gets, I don't know, maybe it's some sort of wild onion. I told you I liked your answer better, except for the larder thing. Pantry, like in the kitchen pantry. I don't know. Okay, let's check out another one. Oh, this is a long one. Oh, no, wait a minute. Okay, we'll save that one. Oh, I love this one. I love this one because I think they have it right in the back. Okay, by the way, I didn't get any of these. I just looked in the back. I'm not very patient. Okay. My home is not silent. I myself am not loud. The Lord has provided for the pair of us a joint expedition. I am speedier than he and sometimes stronger. He stays the course better. Sometimes I rest, but he runs on. For as long as I live in him. If we leave one another, it is I who must die. You think you know, Bailey? You got an idea? What?
Until the end,
Oh, okay. Okay, my home is not silent. We'll just make this the last one, okay? My home is not silent. I myself am not loud. The Lord has provided for the pair of us a joint expedition. I am speedier than he and sometimes stronger. He stays the course better. Sometimes I rest, but he runs on. For as long as I live in him. If we leave one another, it is I who must die. Oh, that's very deeply spiritual. I'm guessing that's not, but yeah. Or I die without him. I mean, spiritually die outside him. This is a very interesting idea. Okay, but explain. Oh, okay.
and how, yeah, like salt with the
Okay, Bailey's got an idea. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but if it's I, you must die. Okay, so to end the suspense, here, oh, Alice, do you have an idea? Ooh, a twin brother. Oh, that's very cool. You have very good ideas about these, Alice. Okay, here's their suggestion. A wolf? A pack of wolves? Yeah.
If we are to leave each other, it is I must die. When wolves are separated.
Oh, because they need the pack. These are all so good. Okay, so here's the thing. I can't tell any of you that you're wrong because nobody knows. So you can just carry that around with you and you can say, I really think I'm right after all these centuries. Okay, their suggestion is, drum roll, a fish in a river. It stays, we have the same course, but if we just separate, it is I who must die. If you take the fish out of the river, the fish dies. Sometimes speedier, I can go against the stream, but he stays the course better. Because I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Anyway, you can also probably Google Anglo-Saxon riddles and have fun with that. I will see you next week. Have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, I guess I can...